Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming back again. I'm going to turn it over to Kriki Kazak to give us her Buffalo Commons introduction to this workshop, and then we'll dive right in. But it's great to see everyone.
So now I scano Kriki Kazak ni geso onondoaga ni. I'm Kriki Kazak. I work on Buffalo Commons, which is the joint collaboration between Cornell ILR here in Buffalo and Partnership for the Public Good. I see a few new faces. So for those of you who don't know, Buffalo Commons works on a few different things. Number one, it's our digital library, which you can navigate to on our website, all the way to the right-hand side, Buffalo Commons Digital Library. And it offers, over 400 different resources that are available to anyone about Buffalo or Western New York. So populations, challenges, opportunities that both Partnership for the Public Good compiles, Cornell, and a variety of our partners. So I encourage you to check it out there. The other thing we do is connect a lot of our partners with researchers. So if you or your organization has any questions that you need support in trying to find answers to, that's one of the things that we can often do is to match you with some of our researchers across the 21 institutions of higher ed here in Western New York who might be able to help answer some of those questions. The final thing is these workshops. So we have these workshops to cover two different things. Number one, skills. So these are skill workshops that help support partners in figuring out, well, how do I do things like work with the media, whether it's written, whether it's like today's TV or interviews. But we also do issue-based conversations too. So things like climate change, but also transportation and education, preservation. I know we've had lots of different conversations with our partners, and we very much encourage you all to talk to each other. Oftentimes when we're in a room like this, we can make those connections with each other and able to support each other's campaigns. So if you have any ideas for workshops or skills that you or your organization are interested in, I highly recommend that you reach out to us, and we might be able to present one of those workshops in this hybrid fashion. So with that, I'll pass it back to Andrea. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So I'm Andrea O'Sullivan, Director here at Partnership for the Public Good. And as most of you know, we are a community-based think tank and a network of about 325 community organizations, and we support those partners throughout the year with action research, civic engagement, and policy development toward our collective policy agenda called the Community Agenda, and on a range of other justice, equity, and sustainability issues. So we are here today for our third and final installment of this edition of Working with the Media. This is a new one for us, focusing on doing really well at TV and radio interviews. And we're so happy to have with us Jay Moran from WBFO and Charlie Specht, an investigative reporter at the Buffalo News, but who had years at Channel 7, so lots of TV experience as well. And we are first going to pass the mic around so you can each introduce yourselves, just who you are. If you are with a PPG partner organization, tell us who that is that you're here with today. And then we will ask Charlie and Jay to just give a brief introduction about themselves and their journalism work as well. Then we are going to hear from these two a range of tips and advice. What should you do before, during, after a TV and radio interview? I know for me, I would say TV interviews are the most stressful part of all the media work that we do. Radio, I feel okay these days. You can have your notes, you can be staring at your screen and be rude to the radio interviewer across from you, but on camera is a whole different thing. So we'll talk through all that, and then have plenty of time for your questions and discussion. And then we're going to have an opportunity to practice, which I hope that some people will take us up on. But let's just go around.
Sarah Jablonski. I'm with Cornell Cooperative Extension of Erie County. I believe we are a partner, and my office is right over there. I work in 4-H youth development.
Good afternoon, everyone. Seamus Gallivan talking with my mouth full. Don't do that in media interviews. I'm with PPG member Slow Roll Buffalo.
Steve Thorne. I'm from the Jung Center Buffalo.
I'm Vicki Kearns, and I'm a volunteer with the Young Center doing some promotion. I do have experience as a reporter, so I've got all ears for what you're doing today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rose. I'm a public health and social work student, and I'm an intern for the Partnership for Public Good.
I'm Stephen Hogsma. I'm with Housing Opportunities Made Equal.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Wooten. I'm the Director of Community Research here at PPG, and I do have to jump out at 1, so I apologize for that, but glad to be here.
My name's Nathan, and I'm unaffiliated.
Kathy Creighton. I'm the director of the Buffalo Collab for Cornell.
Hi, I'm Mara Koven-Gelman. I'm the director of the Jewish Community Relations Council.
I'm Ben Rosick. I'm the communications coordinator at Preservation Buffalo Niagara.
I'm Moran Reglero. I work with PPG as a arts organizer. Today I'm gonna do a couple of pictures. This is just for the archive of PPG, and I don't know if they are gonna publish it, but if somebody has some problem with that, you just can tell me. It's gonna be just a couple of pictures. Okay.
Are both links working for you, or we just have them? They are both are working. Okay.
Hi, I'm Char.
There are not yet. Yeah.
Okay, see if they're not, then we really don't need to speak much.
We actually do because we with your permission, we also record this, and a lot of partners requested who couldn't make it. So they'll listen to the presentation after.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I'd love to not talk into the mic. That'll be so. Okay, Charlie.
Yeah, hi, I'm Charlie Specht. I'm a reporter at the Buffalo News, and I started my journalism career at the News about 10 years ago, and I worked there for a couple of years, and then went into TV, where I worked at Channel 7 for 5 years, and just doing investigative reporting. Did a lot of stories about the Diocese of Buffalo, and then I've been back. I decided to go back into print or digital, whatever you want to call it. And I've been back for about a year, kind of doing the same type of work. And yeah, I'm just happy to be here. I'm by no means an expert on this sort of thing, but there are some general, rules and tips that sort of have in the TV world. And I'm happy to, let you in on some of these secrets or mysteries or whatever. And because I think ultimately, if you're able to talk, more comfortably, and then it makes for a better interview, and you get people to open up, and it ends up being, better for the public to know what you're all about. So.
My name's Jay Moran. I'm at WBFO. I've been there for about 15 years, hosting Morning Edition. Before that, I was in a variety of different capacities in broadcasting, mostly in almost all in radio, from being a disc jockey to being a sportscaster to, well, just about everything, like I said. And recently we started a show called Buffalo What's Next at WBFO that seems to have a certain resonance in the city right now. That's been a real interesting part of what I've been able to do. And probably a lot of what I'll share today is pretty much based on that experience in the last few months.
That's great. And that show has hosted quite a few of our partners and lots of residents and community advocates, and I really recommend it. And I'm sure that's given you an insight into what it's like to sit down and interview folks who maybe are not talking to the media very often. So yeah, to their points, I think our goal for today is really to share tips so that our partners and residents who want to weigh in on important local issues have better luck getting their interviews included, getting quoted in these stories. We have covered in the last workshops, which folks are welcome to get the recording, or these resources are on our website too, on our Work with the Media page. We've covered how to hold a press conference, how to write opinion pieces, so very much how to generate your own media coverage for your issue. So let us dig in. Let us say that one of these partners has sent out an announcement, something important. They've managed to get an interview with a TV or radio reporter. What should they clarify before that interview happens?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on the situation. Probably what they're going to do is ask to meet you somewhere to do the interview. generally speaking, I know that we like to like be in our office and stuff when we're interviewed, but generally speaking for TV, the pictures matter. So they're going to not want you in just sort of a boring nondescript office. The best thing is, they want to do the interview with you and then take what we call B-roll, which is like when you see an interview with somebody, you don't just see their face for like 2 minutes straight. You see, maybe a 10 or 20-second clip of the person's face, and then it'll cut to video of something else of them doing something, so they're going to want to get you sort of in your natural habitat doing whatever it is you do, to get video of that. And if there is no really great video to get, like if it is just sort of like an office, may ask you to come outside, like, and do it on the street, just because to have like the cityscape behind you is just more visually interesting than, than just a blank wall. So it's also important to find out, like, the best case scenario would be like if there's a reporter working on the story and said, well, we're going to story about this and I'd like to interview you. If a TV station assigns a reporter to it, then typically you're going to get like the standard story on TV is like 1.5 minutes, which is not a lot of time. But there's also things called VOSATs. Does anyone know what a VOSAT is? So picture you're watching the 6 o'clock news and like the anchor introduces something, a partnership for the public good. It had this program and here's what they said. And then it will cut straight to, say, Andrea, and she would give like a soundbite, right? And then it would go back to the anchor. So and then they would do like an outro, like they would say, the event is next week. That's different from like a story where a full story is a full package, we call it, would be like 1.5 minutes long, whereas that might only be 30 seconds. So a VOSAT, it's just, it's TV jargon. It has to do with, it's voice over, and then SAT is shot on tape. So it's someone talking and then the soundbite, basically. So I would recommend trying to find out, like, is it going to be a full story, or are you just looking for like kind of a soundbite? Because that's going to determine like how you talk, kind of, because you're not going to be able to get into all sorts of depth necessarily. Talking in, one of the great things about TV as opposed to, let's say, like newspapers, is that the person gets a sense of like your enthusiasm, and like, if you're really excited or interested about something. And the TV camera is like a great like disinfectant, kind of like people will either like you or they won't like you, and different people may like you and not, it's like just meeting someone. There's something about it. Whereas reading it, like in the newspaper or online is different. You're thinking about it, but you're not really getting like the, passion of the person. So I think it's important to kind of be aware of that, and not just to sort of monotone talk about something. Like if you don't look interested, then the viewer is not going to be interested. But you also want to be authentic. You don't want to come off like a circus act, like, you're just really, exaggerating or something, because that's going to look strange also. But the hardest thing for me when I first went into TV was you do kind of have to like project. So I tend to speak softly and mumble. And so like when I was like on TV, like I would have to like talk really loud and like force myself to talk loud, and slow down also, because when you're nervous, I tend to talk fast. Most people tend to speed up. And you want to give people, a minute for your message to sink in. So.
That's great. So a couple of basics, I think, when you're invited for an interview, first is like, is it live or not, I think is important. And then I think we'll talk a lot more about what you started, which is so important, which is like presentation style during interviews as well.
Well, actually, what you just said about live or taped is key critical for what we do, and it'll be, I think, I've kind of had to turn myself around here and think about what it's like from your perspective. But that is a big part of it is just that if it's live, you know, depending on how long it is, it's another key part of it. Length. Always try to always ask that. How long is this segment going to be? Is it going to be 4 minutes? Is it going to be 20 minutes? Whatever the case may be. But with that, if it is taped, it's probably going to face editing of a certain regard. If it's live, you're going to probably have an opportunity to, you know, express yourself a little bit further. Again, if it's longer than say 4 minutes. So those are, I would say, if there are just a couple of things, you know, is it live or is it taped, and the length of the segment.
And then to that point, if partners really have a point they want to get across to this question of live and editing, I've often wondered myself in TV and radio interviews, is it okay, or does it kind of add to the work on your end? Say you really have your main message of your advocacy campaign, you say it has not come out well. Can you say to the reporter, actually, can we stop and I'd like to say that again? And that might vary from TV to radio, because I know sometimes radio, you're kind of recording the full 4 or 6 minute piece, and maybe it's annoying to go back and edit, whereas TV, you're just pulling.
Yeah, on
shorter clips.
TV, you can absolutely do that. It's rare that you're going to be doing a live interview on TV. It's and you'll know if you are, like like you watch like the morning shows, that's where it's common, where like you do what's called a hit, where anchor will go in, you know, to the reporter and say they're live at the Erie County Fair with so and so, and you know, like you'll know they'll be ready and telling you. The majority of interviews are going to be taped. I guess taped is not the recorded, and so you can always say it. You can always say it over, and because a lot of times it's not even the person that's necessarily video taping it that is going to be choosing the soundbite. So like if a reporter's not sent, sometimes they'll just say, well, go to a photographer, go and get a soundbite. And the photographer will go get that, you know, a couple minutes of video, he'll upload it back at the TV station, and then a producer for that show will go through and say, I need a soundbite. I need a 10-second soundbite. I need a 15-second soundbite. And then they'll just pick what they think is the best. So, and that raw interview is not going to go anywhere except on the server at the TV station. So you can always, if you feel like, even if you don't like mess up hugely, you can always say, can I say that again? And that's totally normal. People do that all the time. And I think some people, like a lot of people, assume that it's live. And I think that adds a lot of anxiety to people when they're like, holy cow, I'm going to be on live TV. And clarifying that, I think, can put you at ease, that it's not like this high stakes, you know, like 60 minutes type, you know, thing.
Spotlight.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about you, Jay? It might be different for radio taping.
Generally speaking, I would say I don't really care for that idea of going back. That being stated, though, you know, if the mic's on and you're on, just repeat, you know, just go back to it. You know, I want to clarify that. You know, I mean, that's fine. You know, I rather than say, can I go back and record that? I think that's a slight variation. But I think that's, again, I'm asking you, if I ask you a question and then you kind of follow up with your original point, and then I ask you question number 2, you may want to just restate it. Yeah. So yeah.
That's very good.
And it depends on the speaker too. I mean, if you're interviewing like the mayor and he's like, sorry, I lied about that, let me say something else. Or like, I messed up about that. Like you're a public official, you're used to talking on camera. You're not going to necessarily get a second chance. But if it's somebody that, like, you know, is trying to just, like a nonprofit or something, someone who's not necessarily on TV every day, then yeah, that's going to be more acceptable.
Get a second chance here, friends. That's nice. Very good. And then just to unpack a little bit, the point of asking how long it will be in each of these, for our perspective as advocates and community folks, is for me is about, first of all, how much preparation am I going to put into this? Because if they are just looking for 2 sentences. That's a lot easier, and I don't have to dig as deep to prepare for that. But also, of course, the point is crafting your message and getting your main point across. If it's going to be that short, obviously you can really focus on the tagline for your campaign. What is the policy change? What is the building you're trying to preserve, right? What is the main thing you want to get across? And then if it's going to be longer, you're going to want to anticipate a lot of the questions you're going to be asked. How much will it cost to preserve that building? What's the history of it? All these things. And Buffalo, What's Next is a wonderful opportunity because it's 25, 30-minute segments. So you can, on the one hand, you get a lot in. On the other hand, you have to be pretty prepared because that's a lot of questions to answer. So for me, that's always a critical one is how long will it be? Do folks, I know some of you in here have done interviews, any questions of things that like surprised you when you got there or that you wish you had asked in advance of an interview? I'm trying to remember that for myself too. Probably I was thinking.
Thinking that I'd have questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for doing this, guys. Question with a quick turnaround. So I've worked on their side of the media, and but I came into it through entertainment, human interest sort of storytelling. And last year I worked with Charlie a lot, doing communications spokesperson for India Walton's mayoral campaign. And through that learned that in that process, there's a difference where for the first time, I was asking the journalist, okay, what do you want to talk about? And actually leading in to get to prepare for questions. Now, back in the sort of human interest nonprofit entertainment realm, I'm interviewing with Scott Scanlon tomorrow at Buffalo News. Different sort of approach to a story. Is it common even beyond the candidate political office realm? Is it okay for the interviewee to say in advance, like, to actually sort of dig deeper, ask a couple times, like, what do you want to talk about? And as part of that preparation, because I know that it already starts where Scott says, hey, I want to talk about, and he gives a sort of vague overview that I can prepare with, but like how I don't know, ethical is it for the interviewee to try to find out more and prepare better?
Yeah, and I think an example from our work might be, we get a call from a reporter. We've seen the report on your website about segregation in Buffalo. And, how much can we say, well, what do you want to focus on? The history, current segregation, food issues, school issues, to really understand what we should be preparing.
I'm going to answer you, Seamus, with one of my favorite answers from all interviews. Great question. Which usually it's interesting. Ethical. I don't think that's an issue. Whatever an interviewee wants to tell me is fine. In the end, it's going to be up to me to decide what I'm going to ask and what I'm going to take and follow up on. That with that though is also the idea that I also want to know what your strengths are, and if this is something that is a powerful part of what you're talking about, I want to hear about it, because now that gives me something else to follow up on with maybe an opponent, or just to dig a little bit deeper and really see if there's any depth to what this interviewee wanted to talk about. Maybe they wanted to get a headline out there, but maybe they don't really know what's underneath it. And you do find that occasionally.
Yeah, I think it's okay just, to do that kind of research as part of your preparation. The one thing that some people ask, which is like a big no-no in journalism, is sending questions ahead of time. That's like, we don't like to do that because then that gives, like, especially if it's like a public office holder, then they get all of their handlers and PR people to sort of, game plan the interview, and it ends up being sort of not really authentic. But I think it's okay to, like, I'll give people topics, well, we're going to ask about, like you said, housing segregation, and I saw this, and we're probably going to ask you about this. As a reporter, you're always trying to sort of, it's tough because there's no reason for an interview like we're talking about here to be adversarial, but you're sort of always trying to get people off of the talking points as a reporter, because talking points are like boring. they're important, but boring. Like they're great for like a report, but you want like sort of not an emotional, but a really authentic, like you want to know why this person is really passionate about this issue. And you want to get them to talk about it like sort of more on a human level. And that will typically that will be your best soundbite if you go through the whole interview, is when someone's really interested in something. Like, let's say you use the example as a report on segregation. You know, giving a real specific human story about segregation and talking about what got you into this work and, specific stories, like that's what you're going to be most passionate about as a speaker. And that's what's going to come off best to a reporter. So if you can kind of think ahead of time, why does the average person care about this, and why is it important, that Buffalo is, let's say, segregated? Why is that bad? You want to be able to voice why that is, and to put it in terms that like the average person is going to understand. You got to keep in mind, people's attention spans are not great. And they tell us this as reporters and anchors, like you're competing with, not with like other stations, you're competing with like breakfast, your kids, getting ready in the morning. I mean, people are coming in out of their bedroom and maybe, looking at the TV or even just looking at it on their phone today. And so you want to like get to the point and be eloquent, but you want to be sort of emphatic about whatever you're talking about, because you are competing with all these other distractions that we have in our world today.
And one thing I'm curious, Charlie, that I've often heard is like, you should kind of always smile on TV, even when you're talking about something really serious, which is often the case for us. Not necessarily smile, but you shouldn't look super doomsday on your face. And is that something that is said? Because I've been told that in previous organizational jobs, like don't look super sad and serious, or I think, as you said, like the viewer won't connect with you, but then the issues that we talk about are often sad and serious.
That might be like sexist or something, because I've never asked anybody to do that.
Yeah,
I've never asked anybody to do that.
Not that you would as a reporter, but do you see that?
That's kind of odd to me. I mean, if you're talking about a murder, you don't want to be smiling totally about it. I mean, that would be unnatural, right? I mean,
but it's okay in any case to have emotion coming through in what you're talking about is a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then as advocates here, we are often weighing, do we share personal stories, as you just flagged? Do we use that time to share data and research? Maybe it depends on the story, but any thoughts on kind of which of those you tend to work into your stories more?
Yeah, I would say both. The time for like the facts and data and research, if you can get that to the reporter like as early as possible. I like using, so like the standard TV format is going to be a reporter saying a line, then a soundbite, then a reporter saying a line, then a soundbite. That's typically, I mean, it does vary. Sometimes you put two sound bites in a row from two different people, but that's generally the formula. So I always like just putting facts in for my line, because then it's, frankly, it's less work. You have to, you don't have to worry about being cute and how you write it and thinking that's not really my strength. So I like putting those kind of facts in. But TV reporters today are so, and it's not just TV, but they're so crunched for time. Like I had the luxury when I was working at Channel 7 I had like a photographer with me, and he would do the video and I'd ask the questions. Most TV reporters are doing everything themselves, setting up the camera, putting everything on. And, so they have like, you would not believe this, but almost every night people are making their deadline to get on TV by like seconds. I mean, like it is just, it's like minutes, sometimes seconds. So like if you do send a report with facts, way before the interview even comes across, like they may be writing that in their script And then at 4:30, they're going to be putting in those sound bites. It comes together quickly. So I would say that, like, following up by email or even ahead of time, giving, that sort of thing, you guys publish it on your website, so the reports and stuff are there, is helpful. And then when the interview happens, like, stats aren't necessarily great for an interview unless they're sort of simple. Like the segregation thing, I did a story, and the one stat I recall was 85% of people of color, I think, live east of Main Street in Buffalo.
Specifically Black.
Okay, yeah. That's a stat that you could give in a sound bite, because that's simple and it's like, wow, like, holy cow. I wouldn't necessarily list like 7 different stats, because that's going to get lost and the whole thing is not going to be put in. It's going to be chopped up. And part of the chopping up is not because the TV people think that what you're saying is not interesting. I don't know how it developed, but it's basically people's attention spans. They won't like listen to a soundbite for more than, like, I don't know, 10 or 15 seconds at whatever the whatever the focus groups have decided. That's kind of why. It's nothing personal. It's just kind of the way that the business works.
And so should people, to that point, should we be trying to speak in short sentences during especially TV interviews to help that editing process?
It helps. It's not like a hard and fast rule. I would say maybe I always advise people to try to answer the question. But people are just going to start talking, and that's good. You want people to elaborate. Like for your first sentence, maybe you do answer in a short way and then expand on that. It would be weird for you to talk in only sound bites, like to say a sound bite and then stop talking. I've actually had that before. There was a couple politicians who did that, and it's extremely awkward, and it comes off as very manufactured and sort of not authentic. So it's okay to and I do think reporters do want to know context, and they want to know the backstory, like, because that may not make it on TV, but reporter may say, oh, that's interesting, and file that away for another time or put that in their web story. So I think you can kind of do both a little bit.
And I'll just say real quick, I love that point of sending your detailed materials ahead of time. A few times we've had TV stories where they like took our data and made a graphic on the screen, and we're always so like, that's great, they made a graphic with our stuff, but obviously that takes time, so you have to send it ahead. And I could even imagine like slow roll, if you send your schedule of rides, that would be great to have on screen, but that will take them some time to just make a graphic with it, so yeah.
Have something like a schedule, or just like just hard information that you want them to use. I'm sorry. You have something like a schedule or some hard information. Sometimes you put the necessary information in a graphic when you send it to the media. You can, in the interest of their time, you can earn their favor by typing it out for them so they can just copy and paste it into their story. I mean, it's just a nice thing to do, and they probably they outwardly appreciate it often. So be careful what you put in your graphics. If it like if it's a PDF, then it's harder for them to pull that information.
And this will change too. Like some of these things are basic principles, but TV goes through a lot of like fads with how news is presented. Like for a time at Channel 7, people that ran our company must have paid an ungodly amount of money to a bunch of consultants who decided, wow, people really want and need to see a graph at the end of every story. And so this was pushed down on us. And we called it, I think we had a code where it was called in-depth. We'd be like, well, we need and then so the producer would say, well, we need an in-depth graphic. So sometimes it fits, obviously, and other times you're trying to come up with something. And like that was the rule for like 6 months, and then another consultant decided like that doesn't make any sense, and then you try it. So it does change. So it's good to like just communicate with the reporter, like, hey, is there anything else I can give you, because they may have some sort of mandate from their boss that they want extra data, or it depends on the station too. Like whatever news director is running Channel 4 may like things a certain way. the news director at Channel 7 maybe hates graphs and never uses graphs. So it's kind of, you can feel that out with people.
And that's so interesting. Jay, it seems like a lot of WBFO interviews are at least a bit longer than these short TV clips. So any tips for what content to bring, stories, data, kind of to make the most of that time?
It would be nice to get any type of information when it comes to stats and things like that in advance. That's great for sure. I mean, once we start talking, it's kind of hard to sift through all it, nothing more better than just sit there and talking, trying to ask questions and listen and look through the information at the same time. But beyond that, I would just say, when you come, be ready for, back to what I said before, how long is this going to take? Because I think probably a lot of people here have dealt with our Mike Desmond over the years. And Mike is going, his job was to come to in these meetings and get sound bites, so he was going to ask you whatever, and he loves to ask stumping questions or obscure questions. And it's just who he is and how he goes about getting his story. So yeah, you got to be ready for the way he goes about doing things in that sense. So yeah, I guess you got to be ready for everything when it comes to radio. It could be a little bit of everything.
And then another question I have on this kind of content during the actual interview for both of you. I guess, Charlie, for TV, any more tips, not only on speaking, but posture, how you stand? I mean, I've only had to do that once or twice, what you mentioned of like, let's have you walk through the office for B-roll. And that is the most awkward thing I've ever done. So any tips at all of like kind of appearing on camera? And then Jay, tips about, again, speaking slowly, but other things that work or don't work for radio. I was even thinking maybe, I'm sure something that comes up a lot is we use so many acronyms in our work. We probably should not be using those in these interviews. So any stuff like that.
I'm pretty interested to hear about tips on walking through the office. But I would just say, when it comes to us, tips, acronyms, I think it's all fine. But again, it comes to how much time do we have? If I'm talking to you in the morning and we've got 4 minutes, we got to be really careful about it. I've had people who come on and I'll ask them a kind of an open-ended question, and 2.5 minutes later they're done. And that just really isn't going to make for an effective sound on the air. So the timing factor is so important. If we say, yeah, we're going to be on for 25 minutes, well, sit back and give me what you have, because I'm going to ask more questions. So it'll be fine. But I gotta hear. Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, good.
How much prep are you in in these long interviews that you're doing? How much prep are you guys doing ahead of time?
So for Zoom, how much prep does WBFO or the reporter side do ahead of time, especially on long interviews?
Right. So in this particular case, and that goes back to time, and I did want to make this point, what's really helped, and like you mentioned earlier, we've had a certain amount of people come in who've had almost no media experience. They'll come in and they're looking around, and after we're done, was this live? I mean, it's interesting. There's how some of the folks aren't media savvy at all. And when it comes to radio, let's be honest, not a lot of people are listening to the radio like they were 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So there's just kind of an ignorance of the process when it comes to that. So back to that, how much I want, I'll do whatever kind of research. We've got the internet, and that's great. And we can find out usually about everybody something. But I really hope that and encourage people to get there as early as possible so we can sit down and have a conversation beforehand. And that conversation, and again, it's usually very casual, but I think it really goes a long way to establishing terminology and understanding of different things. If you've got an acronym, what is that? What does that mean? Because I think sometimes a lot of us think everybody knows our story already. And then we're just repeating it, when in fact, it's not the case. It's, we don't know the story. There's elements of what you do that we don't understand. And the sooner we can kind of sift that through before we go on the air, the better. So how much time? I mean, if I have a guest on at 10 o'clock, like I did yesterday, I think it was, or the day before, they kind of blend together. I'll right around 8:30, I'll start going through, getting some online stuff, and hopefully they'll be there by 9:30. And if they're going on at 10, we'll have a chance to spend 10, 15 minutes together, 20 minutes, and get to know each other and get comfortable with everybody. And to me, it has really seemed to bring out the best in people. Once we start, it just kind of cuts away from a lot of the nerves, and it makes for a better conversation that seems to be more listenable.
And it just strikes me as you're saying that that's a good time too for partners to say to the reporter what you can't talk about. I had a lot of interviews in the last couple of years where I was doing an interview on an issue as PPG, and then some reporters would say, well, how do you think the mayoral race will affect that, and which candidate this and which candidate that? And on PPG time, I legally cannot talk about that. 501c3s, we cannot weigh in on elections. So your reaction is fascinating, because in the last couple of years, I learned like many media folks who've been in media for years don't know that. And it led to awkward moments in interviews, because if it was live or being recorded, I would have to say, I'm part of a nonprofit organization, and legally we're not allowed to weigh in on electoral politics and campaigns. I'm like, that's not a great thing to have on the air. It's just not interesting. So that could be a good moment to clarify things like that as well. You know, we're talking about this issue today, but my organization only works on this part of it. I won't have anything to say on this other part, or either I'm not comfortable speaking about this, or I'm legally not allowed to speak about this. If we do, then politicians who hold a grudge can report us to the IRS, and we can lose our tax exempt status. So that's the whole deal. The tax exempt nonprofit status. No grudges at all. So yeah, so that could be a good moment to make those clarifications too. And we do a different workshop, friends, on what advocacy 501c3s can and cannot do. That goes into all that too. Anything else about or I guess we wanted to know, how to be present.
I'm not, you don't
work
wanna
at
sit
your
like I'm sitting right now. I want to sort of sit up straight, and like I said, you know, project. If you talk with your hands a lot, you don't want your hands to be all over the screen. You know, but also solid colors are good on TV. Like, I'm trying to think, I'm not great with women's fashion, but my mom has a shirt. It's really popular. It's like a design where there's like chains and all sorts of stuff going on, and patterns. I don't know what that's called, but like, you want the person to be thinking about your message, not like, what the heck is she wearing, or what the heck is he wearing? Like, and people,
because a pattern like this can like
really,
like your shirt, even would you wear that on TV?
yeah, I think you could. You don't want green. So if you're you'll never see a weather person wearing green. And I think for you guys know why. So there's a green screen. This is only if you're doing like an in-studio interview. I would say that for out on the street, you can wear as much green as you want, you know.
Chains and patterns.
I'm describing the ugliest shirt in the world right now. I hope my mom doesn't listen to this. But yeah, if you are going to be in studio, you should ask if it's going to be. There's a thing now called we call it like a virtual set. So I remember on Channel 7, our 7 o'clock show, I don't even know if they still have that anymore. It used to be called The Now, but it had an anchor, and there were like desks behind them and stuff. And all the desks and stuff were like not really there. It was like this green screen. You could kind of tell it looks a little fake, but like, and if you were being interviewed on that and you wore a shirt that matched, like, this is the color that you don't want to wear, like this kind of green, they call it chroma key. It's you would literally, it would look like you didn't have a body if you wore that shirt. It would, because it would just blend into the background. But it's kind of rare that you're going to be doing that kind of interview. But if you're going to the station, like, you might want to just make sure that it's okay, you know, to wear that. I'm not really big on telling people, like, we interviewed a UB student once, and she had like really low cut like shirt, and like people said some things, but especially like I'm not comfortable like telling people, you know, what to like, how they look. Like, it's just, exactly. I'm not going to do that. Like, there are some traditional rules as far as that goes, but like, it's just not I don't feel comfortable doing that, you know.
And I think for our partners, it would also be think about, I don't know how, if this is good or not, but a lot of our partners, like Seamus has a slow roll hoodie on, partners will wear a large logo of their organization. Is that okay on camera or do you prefer not?
Yes, if it's your organization, like that would be a perfect thing for Seamus to wear, but it wouldn't necessarily be a perfect thing for him to wear a Bills sweatshirt because if the story is not about the Bills, you want to be wearing like what you're wearing in your everyday environment. So just because you're going on TV doesn't necessarily mean you have to wear a dress or a suit or anything. As long as it's, you know, kind of representative of you know, what you're doing. It can look weird out of context. If like, I remember this is years ago, I saw some congressperson walking through the middle of the Iraq desert with like a 3-piece suit on, and it just looked, it looked ridiculous, you know. And it's like, well, they're dressed up, but they're not really dressed in an appropriate, you know, thing. So just wear what you're comfortable with and what you would in your normal day of, you know, doing your job. To a certain extent, like there were a couple of guys who I loved interviewing that were like think tank guys where, you know, like I would just like, you know, want them not to have a shirt on that had like grease on it and stuff. Cause that, like, you know, your credibility to a certain level, like you don't have to look like you're some fashion model, but you also don't want to look like you just rolled out of bed either. Like that's
Greasy think tank people.
I'm not talking about your organization.
I know. Very good. Well, I think we're winding down on our tip section. I want to just ask what we've been asking in these series a little bit. Is there anything that people do frequently, less frequently? Like, what are the mistakes people make that mean you can't use their clip, you can't use their interview? Anything people should really avoid, or it makes it harder to edit them into your story and use their soundbite. And yeah.
No F-bombs.
Good one.
And pauses are good. Like what can be awkward for the reporter is when they do need a 10-second soundbite, and when the person has said something really well, but maybe because they're nervous or it's just the way they speak and they don't pause, it can be a very abrupt cut. So when you're done saying a sentence, you can just, you know, like pause naturally like you would in any conversation. Otherwise it's hard to edit around that.
Does it make a difference? It's just a quick question. Does it make a difference if people stand or sit?
You probably, I don't think it really makes a difference, but you're going to want to ask the photographer. Even as a reporter, I don't have any idea what they should say. They always ask me.
And I certainly hope that you and Devon are on board.
Want to rock though. Rocking is bad. Like people when they get nervous tend to like go like this, and then when you're trying to edit it, you just have a person
Someone else.
yeah, and that can be a habit. I do that when I'm nervous and standing up and talking. You want to try to plant your feet into the ground,
But if it does ring true in any way, I can understand.
That's a comment.
I know how hard it is to let go.
Yeah, very good. And I think that point of pauses and speed is so important too. That's when we often will just share among staff when one of us is going to go off to do an interview. I have said, and hopefully this is true, you know, you probably can't talk slow enough, right? Like we all talk so quickly when we get going. So we say like talk so slowly on radio or TV that it feels awkward to you, and that's probably the right speed. And I wonder, do you think that's right? Or have you ever had a guest and you're like, they're talking so slow, speed up, or that just doesn't happen?
I think there have been a couple that have talked a little too slowly, but yeah, right. Slow down. And probably back to editing, there's percentage of the population when they're talking, they finish their statement and then they immediately go, so Statement number 2. So, and I think I've tried to edit on so more than any other word that I've ever come across.
Or right, like at the end, they'll give the answer. Like if the Niagara Falls mayor used to do that. Every single question is like, right? Like he's getting you, like it, and like he was really smart and really well spoken, but it was just like he's trying to get you to agree to it. And that's like another tick that, you don't necessarily,
And that's why I think practicing can be very useful. So that's a good point, Charlie, because we would like to see if anybody wants to practice.
and watch
which is
yourself, right?
Kind of, yeah. But
You want to watch yourself after you do your interview, or you can put your voice recorder on. I sometimes do this and listen to myself in the car after. And I mean, even the TV professionals that are on every day, I always watched my on camera thing. And I mean, almost every time I would say, you look stupid. Like, why did I look like that? Or why did, it's normal. No one's a perfect TV robot, so yeah, some people are natural, but I bet you even he had to work at it, it really is. It's nothing you can't work on. I mean, it took me about a year of being on TV to even really be comfortable to go on and talk naturally. So if you feel like it's awkward, you're not alone. It's just something that, you will get used to, but I think watching yourself and practicing those things will only make you better.
And I find it's so hard to go back and listen or watch your own clip as well. So it's good to do that for practice. But sometimes when I'm done with one, especially if I don't think it went that well, I'm just like, I can't even listen to that. But yes, winding down on the tip section. Any other questions about this? Yeah.
What about looking at camera? Is that
That is a good one. You typically do not want to look directly at the camera. You want to look at the reporter asking you the question.
And they don't always tell you that. So it's also okay at the start, or if you are just with the camera person, as you said, and no reporter has come, it's okay to say, where do you want me looking? Where should I be looking?
Yeah, that's okay to say that. And the first question they're going to ask you is, can you say your name and spell it for me? Which is kind of just off-putting for people. And the reason for that is because, like I said before, the person that's choosing that video and the person that's writing like your name on the screen underneath you is most likely going to be a different person than is conducting the interview. It's going to be a producer. So that producer just may have this video and say, I don't know who this is. And so they can always go to the beginning and say, okay, this is Mary Smith and this is how she spells her name. That's the only reason. It's not because the person thinks you have, a tough name or something, or like if you're like a quote unquote important person, some people get like offended if you ask that, like, you don't know who I am, it's for that reason. It's because
That's funny. Other questions about preparing, doing it? Mara. Okay. Yeah.
I know this is broadcast and on print. Say you wanted to at least make sure the quote you gave is accurate. Can you ask for that quote to be sent or even spoken?
Yeah. Can you ask for the quote that the reporter in print is going to use? You could ask for a similar thing here. My experience has been that they won't send you the quote in advance, but what do you think?
You're right. Typically not, just because you're sort of opening the door to people editing their quotes and stuff. You could, but I think if it's just a genuine thing where you think you might have gotten something wrong, I think, you don't want to ask for like every quote, but you could say like, I just want to make sure I said that right. I think I might have given you the wrong, I mean, the reporter wants it to be accurate. They don't want to put something in that they don't want to misquote you. That's not going to help them either. So it depends on the situation, but like people sometimes ask for like a copy of the article. Like that's typically not done. But yeah, if you think it like factually, there could be something wrong, then I think that's okay to do.
Anybody else? Yeah, Seamus.
Sort of related to a question you asked, or just a point you made about being a 501c3 and how you couldn't answer a certain question, will offer a wholehearted endorsement of PPG's 501c3 advocacy. I don't know what you call it, workshop. Yeah, it was outstanding. So I actually have word back from Scott saying, and I said second time, like, welcoming any insight as to what you want to talk about. And he gave me 4, he didn't give questions, but he made 4 points, and that's really helpful, right? Because like Jeff Kelly said here a couple of weeks ago, I go in with 6 questions. So in the best way that you can sort of extract that information respectfully, that's why I asked, like, sort of ethically, because we know this isn't a partnership, you're journalists, you know? So sort of with that in mind, like, there's legally some things that you just can't answer, but I had another experience earlier this year with that experience of sort of not screening questions is a bad way to put it, but just sort of finding out, and a TV reporter said, well, we want to talk about this, this, and this. And there was one point that was just completely irrelevant. And I was able to just say, well, that's irrelevant. So I would, I don't have anything to say about that because it's irrelevant to us. What if it happens on the spot? You're live on air perhaps, or you're just, you're being recorded. And what's a respectful way to dismiss a question? Sure, yeah. Or talk about how, like, you might only get 10 seconds. And what sometimes happens is they ask a question that fits their agenda. In this case, it was, what did gas prices affect on slow? Nothing. I think that's terrible. But that's something they wanted to talk about, because that's an important story. But I don't want my 10 seconds on air to be spent on something that's relevant to our.
Yeah. I think that some people do that, actually have to, with me, they seem to have to answer that question a lot. But there's you just try to be as diplomatic as you can. I'm not, and it's different. Like you said, you only have 10 seconds on camera. With us, you're probably going to have a little different kind of scenario. And we probably have already talked about time. I keep coming back to that, but know how much time that you do in fact have. But I also remember, I don't know why this just flashed in my head. I remember listening to a live radio interview. It was on a Super Bowl pregame thing, and the guy asked him, "Oh, so you won the the Heisman Trophy, back in 1973," and the guy goes, "No, you've got me confused with John Cappelletti. I'm Gino Cappelletti. I played in the '60s." I mean, he just had to say it because there's no other way to get around it. So sometimes you just have to correct the person, and you got to take your lumps. And actually, if you're nice about it, you probably win favor with that reporter overall.
Yeah, and you don't want to be like BSing it either, right? I mean, you want to be talking about stuff that you know the answer to, and I think it's okay to. You don't want to just say, "I don't know," but you want to think of a way, like Jay's example was good. Like, "Oh, that's a really good question," and then talk about whatever. It's good to have a couple, backup things in your mind. Things will pop into your head probably as you're doing the interview. You don't ever want, like, you want to talk about your points, but you want to be able to kind of weave them in. You don't want to like get into a thing like a lot of like politicians do, where it's like they just sort of like hijack the whole thing and like don't answer the question, talk about what I want to talk about, and like that doesn't come across very well. I don't think that's endears you to voters or whoever, but you can sort of gently give the idea that maybe it's not like the most relevant thing. You don't want to be like, "That's a stupid question," like. But,
Okay, very good. So we've done a lot on before and during the interview. Super quick on after the interview. Of course, we just advise partners, if you have gotten this great media opportunity and you've been out there, to make the most of it after the fact. So sharing it to your newsletter, putting it on your own social media. If it's a very particular advocacy issue, sending that to elected officials you've been meeting with, who you're seeking to influence on it. So all of that, I think we've talked a bit more in other workshops, and we can revisit all that too. But we're down to our final minutes. We can end early if folks, if we don't have enough, but I hope that everyone will want to practice. So what we were kind of imagining is we could have a few volunteers to do a little mock interview and put these two on the spot as well, because they can kind of take turns. You can tell us, what do you want to be interviewed about? We'll just do a couple of questions and you can practice giving those answers. This can be either on an issue you're working on an advocacy topic, or we can pick, if that's too much, that's all good too. And we can pick like, what's your favorite Thanksgiving dish you want to be sharing about, because I think so much of this is really about presentation and speaking skills. And yes, your content and your message is important, but it's also that other piece equally too. So I wonder if we have any volunteers. I think there are folks on Zoom too. If anybody on Zoom wants to do an interview, we can put you up on the screen. I know you probably all want to do it. Anybody in the room wants to practice doing an interview? Sarah. Yay. Let's hear it for Sarah. Okay, what topic? Because let's say you've had a very successful press release. You've been contacted. We want to interview you about this topic. So what topic do you want to talk about?
Involvement in 4-H.
Okay. So I guess you have to interview without knowing any context of this.
That happens sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. So this is good practice for you too as well. So youth involvement in 4-H in Buffalo. Who wants to take the interview?
Okay, I'll do it. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is a pretty that's right. That's right. She should be the reporter here. So can you say your name and spell it for me?
I can. Sarah Jablonski, SARAJABLONSKI.
Okay, and what's your title?
4-H team leader for Cornell Cooperative Extension of Erie County. Do I have to spell that?
No.
Okay, good.
But you should maybe specify at some point whether there's a dash between the 4 and the H.
There is.
Okay, there is. I'm from Marilla, so I know.
Oh, nice. Cool.
But okay, so tell me a little bit about what you guys do.
So 4-H youth development, some might know, especially if you're from Marilla, is very focused on agriculture, but also in the city of Buffalo, we do offer 4-H programming for young people. And I'm focused on teen leadership around civic engagement. And so we have a number of initiatives that we are doing in Buffalo. And the goal is to really bring the opportunities of 4-H, which are about public speaking, youth leadership, life skills to young people in Buffalo.
Okay, you're swiveling in your chair.
Seriously?
So you want to, yeah, you're like
It's like so obvious.
it's
Everybody, I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah.
The swivel chair.
Yeah.
I don't usually have a swivel chair.
Yeah.
The edge. Okay.
That was good. And then so you might get a general question like that. And why is this important for kids in Buffalo? Why do they need to know about farming?
Well, we do have food systems initiatives in the city of Buffalo with 4-H, but 4-H is not just about agriculture. 4-H is about supporting young people where they're at. And why they should get involved. Well, it's going to help build their skill sets. But I want them to understand, I want everyone to understand that we're not just trying to put something on young people. We're not saying you have to raise animals to be part of 4-H. We're trying to come to them and bring out their own skills and build up their skills and connect them to opportunities. The 4-H program connects young people to Cornell University. We have important field trips. How do I call? They're not. I didn't want to just call them trips. We have lots of opportunities for young people to be involved with, and we don't want anyone to be excluded. We want all youth in Erie County to have the opportunity to build their leadership skills in whatever areas that they're interested in, and where our skills and where their interests meet.
That was a good answer. So do you have any examples you can give of students or successful, I don't know if you call them graduates of maybe thinking of getting into it? What are some things you can point to?
So our signature 4-H after school program is called Youth Community Action Network. And we've had a lot of success working at multiple schools, including Tapestry, Olmsted 156, Global Concepts in Lackawanna, as well as Lafayette. And that program is about young people identifying issues in the community that are important to them and then developing projects to address those issues. So we've held 2 community and police speak outs, which PPG has partnered with us on, as well as Open Buffalo and other partners. So that was an example, you know, especially around all the police shootings were happening other places. The youth felt it was important to have a conversation with the police and invite the community to be part of that conversation. Oh my God. So we do have that program ongoing now. It's no longer at schools, but we're meeting at Say Yes on Jefferson Avenue. And we're recruiting right now for any teenager in Buffalo who wants to be involved. We're currently working on a project about restorative justice circles around the conversation of white supremacy, you know, a light topic. So if any young people want to be part of that conversation, they're welcome to join us.
Maybe I might say like, oh, how did you get into this? How did you get, were you in 4-H when you were younger? And
oh, I was not in 4-H. No, I'm part of this. I got involved in this job because I didn't really know what the job description was. It kind of tripped me up, and I was like, well, this could be an opportunity to learn something new and maybe apply my own interests to the job. And I knew 4-H was about food. So I came to the job thinking that I would be working on gardening, you know, getting everybody involved in gardening. And then this opportunity came along to do this program called Youth Can, which is about asking young people what they want to do. And then I realized that I care much more about that than pushing my own agenda, or like, because I love gardening, I want other people to garden. I love helping people see what their vision, bringing it to reality. So when the shooting on May 14th happened, we were talking about anti-racism, and we were going to do a series of interviews about like school curriculum, different things like that. And now we wanted to shift to really respond to that incident. And so I love that ability to be able to adapt and pivot, because I've done that in my own life. And I'm blessed to have a job that I can do that, apply that there.
Well, by the way.
So I really liked how you asked that question, because it brought me to like really
about your own experience.
Yeah.
You know, you're not just trying to remember like
shit, like
yeah. Yeah, and the reporter is sort of trying to warm you up in that way and make you feel.
And he thinks that there was, we all met with her and wants to follow up and everything. So I said, no.
Very topical. So anything when I say topical, like it's in the news, it's a big like civic issue that maybe they're interviewing you, and even if it's not, that may be, they may say, oh, this is really relevant because that's interesting. I never had any idea 4-H had to do with anti-racism. I thought it was just, you know, raising goats or whatever, you know,
like
and
the opposite kind of.
yeah.
Maybe.
You did it really well. Yeah.
That would be cool. Folks in the room, any feedback for Sarah?
Well, I think one thing is now, at least we're very interested in 4-H.
Oh, cool. Oh, awesome. Great. That was successful. Thanks.
No, she doesn't need to fall. She had made Sarah arranged for one of those medical group things, but where they are, she the last walk from the room. Yeah, where's her walker? Yeah.
4-H. Again, when you maybe only get.
Point of it is she's wearing it. Yeah, she doesn't. It's very bad.
You're carrying in like, well, there's this perception.
Right.
She's going downhill, and it is worrisome. And now it's like, yes, the confusion is test. So we need to.
I have
They told me
focus and flow.
I don't know. It was very. He said, you know, not all. They said the reason we can call you and share. You know.
And Seamus, you remind me of planking. This was a terrifying thing. It would sometimes happen to me when I saw the thing counting down from like 5 to 1 when I'm about to go live, and I'm like about to make a fool out of myself in front of thousands of people. But that happens. And what I used to do was keep a little piece of paper in my
Them about that I'm allowed to know.
one
I'm
or
like,
two bullet
that's
points,
nice.
even just, I found when reading something, if I could remember the first couple words of what I wanted to say, like the rest just flows. But sometimes those, like that first sentence, you just sort of like blank, you get nervous, and you can keep a little visual aid to like, not to look at like during the interview, but just right before to get yourself in, you know, in the mindset. Because
I don't know.
can happen.
I've only been to like, the 2 rooms. I don't even know if she has like a
One
bar.
super tiny thing that I made a note of at the beginning, because I've done this in interviews, is you answered the first question and said, 4-H, since you're from Marilla, is blah, blah, blah. And then they can't use that clip because you've said something that has nothing to do with the viewer didn't see. And that often happens to me. We talked in our first media workshop that there's also this practice that's quite perplexing to us outside of TV, that they'll come to your press conference and you have just given your whole speech to the cameras, and then they want to pull you to the side to do a headshot interview, and you kind of have to repeat all your points, which feels very weird. But we know what we talked, they have to do that because it was said they want something, maybe this, I don't know if it's what you think, Charlie, but Jeff Kelly said they want something different than all the other networks are going to show. So they don't just want to have the same picture and the exact same quote. And then also they want like the different view of just one person. But anyway, in those interviews, especially, I found myself saying, well, as I just said, this and this, or the Bills Stadium should have these benefits because as John just said, and the viewer did not hear what John just said. So I think that's one I've caught myself doing before too.
And you get a more natural, the other reason to do that, pulling aside, is you'll maybe get a more natural thing one-on-one as opposed to this, with all this gaggle of reporters, and you're standing at a podium, and it's naturally going to be more kind of stiff. And that's another reason that they might want to do that. Yeah. Nothing you did wrong at the podium. It's not because you said something wrong. It's just,
We actually said, this is probably against your desires for something more natural, but we said you should feel free to kind of repeat your thing again, because a lot of us have felt like we have to say something really different because this same camera person just recorded our whole spiel, but then they only use the second part and then your main points are gone. So we said it's okay to like really repeat your main points. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Another thing too, you might want it with press conferences. A lot of times there's politicians in the background. There's a few in particular that are like experts at sort of positioning themselves behind the person that's talking so that they will be in the shot for some reason. And during an election time in the media, we are on the lookout and trying not to, like let's say there's a town council race and there's 2 candidates, and because the mayor of whatever town is a Democrat, he's going to have that Democratic candidate behind him because it gets his name out there. You want to, like, during election year, we want to avoid that unless it's like a story about politics. So we want that the mayor, whoever it is, we don't want to give free publicity to either candidate. And so they might pull you off because of that.
That's great. Do we have another volunteer? Yes. Let's go down here. Yeah, take the hot seat here. I like this approach. What would you like to be interviewed about? What's your interview about that you're trying to communicate?
Well, I guess I would say that I'd rather be interviewed by about my organization rather than my dog who passed away 2 years ago. But that's basically it. Yes. Who am I
I'll
going to talk
do
to?
this one, Charlie.
Okay, and Sarah,
My name is Jay.
Jay.
And your name is?
Steve.
Steve. And what's your organization, Steve?
Well, the organization, the formal name is the Analytical Psychology Society of Western New York. I know you love that, but we go through a different name called Young Center Buffalo, JUNG. And
okay,
you thought that, didn't you? But you were wrong.
So Steve, how long have you been in the organization?
Well, I've been in the organization probably about 3 years, and I've been this is my second year as president.
What drew you to the organization?
I beg your pardon.
What drew you to the organization?
Well, of course, I was asked by a friend to join because he knew I had a background in philosophy and in psychology, or rather in social work, and just felt that the mission and the aims of the Young Center, which have to do with education and deepening psychology and deepening the perspective of people on their lives and also in the culture, he felt I would be a good fit, and so far it has worked out.
How many people are involved in the society?
Well, we have a small board currently, under 10 people, and we have probably, a mailing list of like 400 people, but the formal membership is probably 50-ish.
And do you have regular meetings?
We have regular meetings. Obviously, a board has a meeting once a month, but we provide programs and talks and lectures that are open to the public, not just to the membership. And in fact, one coming up later this month, October 28th, we have a fantastic program. It's called The Red Book Revealed. And if you don't know what the Red Book is, I can tell you.
Well, tell me all about the Red Book, or at least do so.
I'll tell you a little bit because we got a whole program on it. Now, the Red Book is actually, it's kind of a secret book that Dr. Carl Jung put together in his middle to later years. And he obviously was a prolific writer, an analyst, with clients, and but he had a wide range of interest. He was a Swiss citizen, and obviously a contemporary of Dr. Sigmund Freud and many others like that. But the Red Book is a result. It's not a book that was designed to be published. It was a result of his exploration into the unconscious. Freud and him really discovered something called the unconscious. And Freud, of course, made a big deal of it, and so did Jung, although in a different direction. And the book has to do with his explorations and his discoveries and the personages that he encountered in this kind of like this underworld. And he made it into a book with beautiful and striking symbolic pictures and mandalas, and with a text. And we have a copy of this in our library, and it's like, it's a bigger than a tabletop book. It's pretty big.
So Steve, you probably get a lot of questions from friends and such about this, but what would be the thing that people find most surprising when you tell them about, for example, Carl Jung's Red Book? What would be something that just all of a sudden, or more specific, let's get into the unconscious. What surprises people when you tell them a little bit about the unconscious that they probably didn't know?
Well, they probably didn't know that they have an unconscious. And, now if we tell them that, then we'll try to educate them into how to be more familiar with the depth in themselves. A motto that we have is called education for the soul. And that really kind of encapsulate the essence of what we want to do. We want to educate people that our soul and our psyche is not something to be ignored or denied, but our lives are made more richer with a relationship to our insides, and our culture will benefit as well.
Steve, thanks very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
One thing that was really great. Thank you. Oh, I was just going to say one thing that just reminded me, don't ever grab the microphone. Like for a TV interview, some people, like when they think you're like offering it to them, take it, and then you're playing tug of war with the microphone. They'll never, unless they specifically say,
they tip it to you, you're just supposed to talk into it. You're not supposed to hold it, take it.
and the reason is because for the reporter to ask the question, they have to get it back, In this case, you know, it's different, but
Yeah.
because for them to ask a question, they have to put it back. It would be awkward to keep handing it back. So
Yeah, very good. So feedback for Steve on that interview.
I thought it was good. And actually, I was thinking, boy, you're making it difficult for me because it really went on into a lot of areas. But this would be the kind of conversation I would have before he came on the show, right? So we can kind of start narrowing down terminologies. And so that was the one thing I thought about when we were talking. This would be the conversation I would want to have beforehand, and then I think we could go off and we'd have a great conversation. Yeah, yeah. But that's nothing really not your fault. It's just But back to time. How much time do we have?
I want to just say I noticed Steve's wore NPR socks today.
Oh wow! I didn't notice that.
Did you do that? It's on theme. It's on theme. But there it is. There it is.
Oh, okay. Thank you for your membership.
I thought you did a good job at like pivoting those questions that were, some of those were like personal questions, but you pivoted it back to the organization and the programs you offer, which I thought was great to do that too. Like, obviously you want us to answer personally, but you were said, I got into it because of this, and we have these programs now, and this is the mission of the organization. So that was good. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That, like, both of you asked this question, that is my favorite question as an interviewer, is you're getting to the heart. You ask them what inspires you, what led you, like what, and so that is an opportunity for you to express your passion. And you started to do that, and you combined it with the mission of the organization, and that's just a plus. You combine your personal passion while getting your mission out. Yeah.
Great. Great, Steve. Thank you.
Okay, really quick.
Yeah.
I just want to say like a quick PSA, whatever like that.
Here, do you want to? Sorry. Pass that one around.
Really quickly.
So the Majority Leader People Stokes will be hosting a free LLC formation workshop. It's going to be December 8th. It's going to be at Northland Training Corridor. It's going to be from 3 p.m. to 6, and we are in partnership with the Western New York Law Center. So for people who have any questions, you can give us a call at 716-897-9714.
That was very quick. I'm just going to add one thing, and just it kind of just follows up on a lot of the things, but since I wrote it down, don't obscure your power. You know, the thing I find in interviews and I really enjoy is, especially for agencies that are public advocacy groups, is at the core of it all, there's this great power. And when that comes out in an interview, it's the best. And whether it's for, an organization or if it's a person. And so don't obscure it, live it, get it out there. Maybe the best thing to say about it is find different ways of saying it, whether it's 10 seconds or 30 seconds or 90 seconds, have a way of saying it, and don't be afraid to bring it out.
Don't obscure your power.
And if you're trying to think of a way that you can boil down your thing into a soundbite, think about how you would describe it to like a friend or, your partner or somebody, kind of an elevator speech type thing. It's a little trick that I use to like think, what's the headline of my story, or what, just, think about how you describe it to somebody who's maybe not in that world. And then that gets your brain going in the right direction.
Wonderful. Well, it's 2:00. So yes, final
I
word.
just wanted to add, Steve didn't mention that the Red Book Revealed presentation is going to be next Friday at Trinity Church. We have a room there at 7:30. So students are $5, and it's a beautiful book, and it's an archetypal expression of spirituality and psyche together. It's really brilliant.
Thank you. Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for coming, and huge thanks to Jay and Charlie. I feel like I learned a lot. And so hopefully when the microphone or the camera is in front of you next time, you'll feel super confident from this. So thanks so much.
Okay.